Welcome to Hired the Podcast. I'm here today with Dr. Kristen Donnelly, TEDx presenter, international educator, and public speaker, and founder of Abbey Research, a firm that specializes in helping other companies focus on employee engagement and retention. Kristen, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Travis. This is really fun.
Of course. So talk to me a little bit about that. Why is engagement so important for retention at companies?
Well, there's, all of the more financial reasons, right? The more people feel like they've bought into a vision, then the more money you make and all that kind of stuff. But which is not small. A huge part of business is making payroll and keeping the lights on and doing all that kind of stuff. But another huge part of business is making sure that your team is safe emotionally, physically, and providing them a place to be their personal best professional selves, allow them to thrive. And to me, that's what engagement really means, is that your staff knows that you have their back and that everyone there knows their job and they're all doing it effectively. And that then leads to more personal fulfillment for your staff. Whether or not they find fulfillment in their job, they at least know that they're safe and wanted there. But if they are somebody who finds a lot of fulfillment in their career and in their tasks, then I think it's a huge part of your job as a leader to make sure that there's ways for them to do that. So engagement's important because, replacing somebody is 150% of their salary. Hiring is annoying, like we all know it is. It's just annoying. And very few of us actually have the time to dedicate to do it really well.
Yeah.
So there's all that stuff. But I think the stuff that's often not talked about when it comes to engagement is that you work with people and people need to know that they matter. And if you aren't doing the work to make sure that they know that they matter, not entirely sure that you deserve to be in charge of people.
That's interesting. And you mentioned that word safe a couple of times, and we talked about that before. That I think you said, and correct me if I'm misquoting, but feel that your primary job is to keep your employees safe.
I do, yeah.
I've never heard anyone put it like that before. Tell me what that means to you.
Sure. So I co-own a network of companies with my baby brother, actually, and we took it over from our dad. And so I've been around this business for around 33 years. And I can do the math because he bought it when I was 7 and I'm turning 40 in a couple months. But it's the biggest, like the flagship of our network is manufacturing company, where OSHA is a big part of our daily conversations. And so it's always been impressed upon me my whole life that our job as employers was to do absolutely everything possible to keep our employees physically safe. We go above and beyond OSHA stuff because of our own ethic. But then the older I got and the more I started talking about the ins and outs of things with my dad, and the more I started realizing how the world works, to be completely honest, I realized that making payroll was a huge part of keeping them safe. Mm-hmm. And being the person that if a customer got mouthy, like we're the ones that get on the phone, made them safe. And then in the last couple of years, since post lockdowns, we've been very fierce with boundaries that our folks can be with their family when they're home and be here when they're here as much as possible. We don't believe in a separation. But the more I think about that and how carefully we enforce, no, we know you're a workaholic, so we're not giving you a key to the building kind of thing. The more that's about keeping them safe. Uh-huh. And so it's a huge thing. It's the best way I know how to say it. If I do my job and they are physically, emotionally, spiritually, economically safe in this place, then I don't have to worry about taking care of my customers because they'll do it.
So how do you teach your customers to practice those same things?
It's a great question. I think sometimes we do it by, like, if you start to be terrible to any of our employees, you get my brother on the phone real fast and his patience is real short with that. If you don't treat our employees like a human being, you're going to find out pretty quickly that doesn't fly around here. We're lucky, though, that we work with, all of our customers are obviously wonderful. And we have a lot of long-term relationships because we happen to be a pretty exclusive supplier in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. So on the manufacturing side, they know our standards. But then when I do, I run Abbey Research, which is the training division of this, that we go out and I help other companies do the same thing. And to have the same kind of mindset that we do here at Abbey companies, that you can always, in a certain way, people are a non-renewable resource. If you know what you're doing, you can either always make more money or it's time to shut the business down. You can't always get good people. Like, people are the non-renewable resource. And so, yes, I have to keep the lights on. Yes, we have to make payroll. Yes, we have to do all of that. But if our turnover is excessive and our folks don't like working here, what are we doing? So I go and teach other people how to do that. And a lot of it, to be completely honest, is simple mindset shifts. It's small ways every day to remember that your employees are people. And the core of your business is people. I don't care what you make. It's still people. And so it's helping people do different disciplinary meetings or framing them differently. It's helping folks frame employee engagement events a little bit differently. More than anything, my job is to teach people that different people are different and they're going to need different things. And how do you learn to ask questions and make less assumptions? And that inherently creates engagement because you become more trustworthy and you become a person they know is keeping them safe. A lot of this is subconscious. Like, I don't think if we went outside and I grabbed one of my employees and I asked them to describe my job, I highly doubt any of them would say Kristen's job is to keep me safe. They'd probably say Kristen's job is to crack jokes and Kristen's job is to make sure the snack cabinet is full. I don't actually know what they'd say, but I doubt it would be safe. But when people feel safe, things happen. Growth happens. When people don't feel safe, when they don't have those basic emotional needs met, no growth happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked just there about we're all different. There's all of these differences. And I don't want to steal too much thunder from your TED Talk because I think everybody should go out there and watch it. I mean, great investment of 17 minutes. But you talk so much about the difference between diversity and inclusion, and how you think we've accepted tolerance as a baseline, and that's crushing our ability to grow with each other. I was so fascinated about that. I kept thinking about it. We talk so much about tolerance, but I was thinking about the root word of it, tolerate. Tolerate is when I went to my grandmother's house and she made her really shitty meatloaf. I would tolerate it. That's not a good thing. Tolerance is not a good thing. So I'd love to talk to you more about how you developed your ideas on diversity and what that means and how to identify that we're all different, but we all have similarities.
Wow, that's such a great question. I mean, yeah, I always say tolerance is simply saying you're alive because it's illegal to kill you. Like, that's all tolerance really is. How did I come to it? I mean, I think I've been in leadership in youth ministry groups in my church when I was growing up since I was like 11, doing event planning and things like that. And the very first time I went to an event where people were talking about racial reconciliation in the church, again, I was 11. And all we did was put Black people and white people in proximity to each other. And then we all congratulated ourselves that we had solved racism. That was in like the year of our Lord, 1994. Like, it's been a minute. And as I grew up and I went to a small Christian college where they kept constantly talking about diversity. And they were like, we really need more diversity on campus. And it just started really bothering me because I was like, I'm one of the only people from north of the Mason-Dixon line. I'm the only one of my friends at this place whose father owns their own company. Like, that makes me different. And you're not interested in my difference because I'm also a white lady. And so I started digging into things like intersectionality and Kimberly Crenshaw's work and started kind of looking at all that. And then I spent a year after my undergraduate working in Northern Ireland, which is a visually homogeneous place, but easily one of the most, with all vast pockets of different ways to do human. And that taught me a lot about what diversity and inclusivity really looks like. And that place is just brimming with diversity you can't ignore and you can't pretend is somewhere else. It's just not a lot of visual diversity. And so that, again, that just kind of all accumulated and all added to it. And sometime in my mid-20s, I was in a social work program. And I was again, look, I'm a nerd. So I was just reading a lot of books and thinking about a lot of things. And I was doing an internship in Camden, New Jersey. And it just kind of all clicked for a little bit. That the more I thought about how we were having conversations, especially in corporate, which I knew from friends and from my dad complaining about things he had to go to, that we just kept pretending that the only difference that mattered was skin tone. And the only difference that we needed to always make sure we had in the room was people of different skin tones. And I just started getting really angry about that. Because first of all, that's what leads to tokenism. Like that means that any person of color who walks into a room, the only thing that matters about them is the color of their skin, which is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It doesn't allow them to be the full expression of themselves, nor does it allow any white folks to be the full expression of themselves because they're in that room because they're white. And it's often still that version of racial diversity is often used to continually exclude Indigenous and Asian and Latino people in delightfully awful ways.
Yeah.
So when I took all of that and I really started, again, writing and thinking and talking to other people, and again, my husband is from Northern Ireland, and I moved back over there in 2011 to do my PhD. And again, every single one of my friends in Northern Ireland was white. Every single one. I had, 2 friends from England, 2 friends from down south, another friend from America, people who were in all different communities in Northern Ireland. If you look at a picture of us, we all look exactly the same. And not a single one of us had the same views on anything. We didn't have the same life experience. We didn't have the same economic status. We weren't in the same degree programs. But if you look at us, we all look the same. And so when it came time to kind of really think about if I had one talk in me, I got to take the TED stage one time. What's the thing I wanted to say? And the thing I wanted to say is that tolerance is garbage. And if we don't start realizing the fullness of everybody, every room you walk into is diverse. I don't care what it looks like. Because you as a person are diverse. You are not just whatever you look like. You are also a product of your home life. You're a product of the faith you were raised in or not raised in, a product of the state you were raised in. I mean, I tell this story all the time, but one of my best friends, I was raised in suburban Philadelphia. And one of my best friends was raised an hour and a half north in the mountains in Philadelphia. And we were talking once and she just started describing something. And she's like, well, I'm sure you learned about the miners' strike of whatever in school. And I just blinked at her. I was like, no. She's like, you didn't take Pennsylvania state history? And I was like, Pennsylvania state history is American history. Like, I just grew up going to Independence Hall. She's like, I've never been to Independence Hall. So again, we are 5 years apart, both white girls who were raised in Pennsylvania with vastly different experiences. And so then I developed, and with the help of my partner, Aaron, when we started really talking about what could inclusivity means, it goes back to anti-tokenism.
Anti-tokenism, okay.
How do you create an environment where everybody shows up on their terms and they get to bring to the table whatever they want? So you're never not who you are. When I walk into a room, I'm never not a business co-owner. I'm never not a wife. I'm never not those things. But there are certain conversations I don't feel like being a business owner in. There's conversations where it's not super appropriate that I'm a wife. It doesn't matter.
Sure.
I get to decide based on the conversation, based on the room, based on the environment, who I want to be in that room. And everyone deserves the same dignity. to choose who they want to be in that room. And that's inclusion.
That's inclusion. How do you couple that with so many groups that have been beat down upon for centuries, and there are still so much systemic racism and sexism that people are unaware of in their unconscious biases?
Oh, for sure.
How do companies truly promote diversity and inclusion? I mean, I think it's probably so much harder, because to promote diversity and inclusion based upon these binary factors, are you white? Are you a person of color? Are you a woman or a man? That seems so easy, and still so few organizations are doing it.
I mean, so a huge part of my life is telling everyone that if we all just ran our lives like we went back to kindergarten, it would be a lot better. And here's how you integrate it. But I mean, the quick answer to that is that a lot of us start with the big things. So you want to create an inclusive environment. You want to tackle systemic racism. Friendo, that is above your pay grade.
Hell yeah. That's for sure.
And it's above most DEI folks I talk to. I don't think they should start there either, because there's so much groundwork that has to happen with that. We have to have conversations about systemic oppression. We have to have conversations about that make people deeply emotional and uncomfortable. Where you start is the not emotional things. Where you start is by asking questions of a room. Like, hey, I'm looking around. Do you think that we have a pretty accessible office to somebody in a wheelchair? Hey, it's Ramadan next week. Do any of you know anyone who's fasting? Like, what do you think it's like? I notice on your, I heard you talking to somebody the other day that you're a practicing Sikh. I don't know what that is. Would you mind sharing with me what that means for you? Some of those are pretty high stakes. Faith is really high stakes. Mm-hmm. You can also ask, like, hey, who here is a real big fan of Game of Thrones? Who grew up on a farm? When we do the Women's World Cup in a couple months, what country are you rooting for and why? Those are all still things that make us diverse. Uh-huh. They're low stakes. They're easier to talk about. Because then once you create that sense of, I really care about these things too, what you're doing is subliminally telling people you see them as people. And if you see them as people and not flattened caricatures of some category they belong to, some of the harder conversations get easier. The other thing I often tell people about both gender and race is that they have to be aware that the way we have shaped that conversation in America automatically makes someone feel guilty about it. So when we talk about oppression of women, men who especially men either get defensive or they begin to feel guilty. We talk about oppression of people of color, white people get defensive or they feel guilty. None of those are productive emotions. None of them are. And so in order to have a conversation about systemic anything, systemic ability, systemic socioeconomic privilege, systemic racism, pick a system, you have to figure out a way to strip the emotions out of it. And if you can't do that, don't have the conversation.
And that's above a lot of people's pay grade.
It's above most people's pay grade. And then a DEI consultant comes in and God love them, they're all well-meaning, but then the folks don't do the work after they leave. And it becomes a tick box exercise that a company can say, we hired a DEI consultant, we're diverse now, congratulations. Mm-hmm. And it just perpetuates this cycle of tolerance and anger and shame and guilt and fear and disillusionment and division. You gotta do the simple but super hard thing of seeing everybody like a person.
So where does a company start? Where does a leader start and say, I want a diverse organization. I want to recognize my people as people. I'm committed to having diversity of thought and ideas and backgrounds. Where do they start? I mean, other than making that decision and being able to see that it's something to focus on, where do they start from there?
somewhere. I know that sounds really simple, but so often I find that business leaders want to make everything strategic. Sometimes you just pick a thing and start. So, but I always recommend the low stakes stuff. So like legitimately set out 10 jars this summer, pick the 10 finalists for the World Cup and have people start voting with something about who's going to make the finals. Do a fun fact every week about the country those folks come from. I'm a big believer in food. So like do a team event where everybody has to bring their favorite childhood meal and share it with everybody else. Like all of that is going to depend on what size of team you have, what industry you have, like all that kind of stuff. And I love to brainstorm these kind of ideas with people. So please, anyone listening who's like, I don't know what to do, get in touch with me and I'll brainstorm these with you. I adore it. It's my favorite thing to do. But my biggest tip is find something low stakes and start there. So like, gosh, do an Oscar pool. I don't care. Like if you're in a city that has a really good sports team right now, have fun with that somehow. It's not going to hit everybody. You're not going to do it perfectly. But what you want to do is just engage humanity. So like here, obviously we're in Philly and Philly has a significant relationship with its sports teams. And so like when the Eagles won the Super Bowl back in 17, 18, whenever that was, my brother and I weren't owners, but we were leaders at the time. And the decision that we made was if anybody wanted to go to the parade, we wouldn't dock them a sick day. Uh-huh. If you wanted to stay and work the day, I bought you free lunch and you got some other perks. But we weren't going to dock you a sick day or anything else if you went to the parade. And I know so many other companies that didn't do that. So many other companies that made people take sick days. And like, it's a massive cultural celebration. A lot of people didn't care. And I was here for them for that. I also hate crowds. I don't do parades. My brother's like right down by the Rocky statue in a human crush and loving his life. So that's silly, but it's not. It's not at all.
No.
So start with the low stakes stuff. Start again somewhere. Recognize really quickly that you're going to screw it up. Get real used to saying that you're sorry. If there's a population you want to start with, do some Googling first so that the person that you're engaging with is not your human Google and you can ask informed questions. So, for example, let's say you have one person from, I don't know, I'm picking a country here, Brazil, on your team. And you want to do a, carnival type thing at some point. You go to them with questions of like, hey, I know this is like I've researched and here's the things that I think we could do. Do any of those resonate with you? Do you want to be involved in this? You don't go to them and say, hey, you're Brazilian. You now need to be in charge of our carnival celebration.
That's lumping them into, that's solely identifying them by that one thing only.
And then you also have to respect if they look at you and say, please don't do this. I don't want Americans doing it. You have to go, okay, how can I help? How can we celebrate something that you love in another way? Your ideas are very rarely going to be the best ones as a leader. Your job is to make sure you can identify the best ones.
That's a great sentiment right there. It's hard. So many leaders think that they need to be the smartest person in the room at all times. I really think that their job is to probably be the least smart person in the room. Just be best at listening.
Yeah. And we also need to start talking about smart a little bit differently. So, and all of those kinds. So a lot of people assume that smart means you have a lot of degrees, because that's how we measure that here in the West, especially, but definitely in America. So I have a lot of letters after my name, 9 of them, in fact. And when I meet people, I can tell immediately that when they get defensive about that, because they'll enter every sentence with, well, I'm not a doctor or anything. And I just look at them and say, they give out PhDs for reading, writing, and talking. I am good at nothing else.
I doubt that's true, but.
Like, I'm good at the things they give the degrees for. What intelligence is truly is the higher your IQ is, the more you are able to quickly process a lot of pieces of information at once. That's it. You can train yourself to have a higher one by taking in a lot of information and training your brain to have those things all at once. But your IQ could be 101 and you're still the smartest person you could be the janitor and be the smartest person in the building because your brain works where you can hold a lot of information at once. That's it. You can process and hold a lot of information at once. It doesn't again, if you want to grow your intelligence, there's lots of ways to do it. Reading widely, meeting other people, enriching your life, et cetera, et cetera. None of those things, does processing a lot of information at once make you a good leader? It can. It can also make you obnoxious and really hard to work with. Intelligence doesn't have anything to do with leadership, except that at a certain point, you do begin to realize that your brain is too full and you need other people to help you. Uh-huh. And that's it. I definitely have the most degrees in my building, hands down. I have the most letters after my name. I am 0% the smartest person in this room. Especially with certain things. I don't know how to make our products. I have no idea. I don't know the customer history of most of our customers. So when I need a question answered or I don't know anything, I'm going to sit there and be like, I need you to talk to me like I'm a kindergartner. I don't understand chemistry. Help me understand why this process just went wrong. Mm.
Well, now you're talking my language, because that's a mountain that I'm willing to die on, is that people focus too much when they're hiring on degrees and past direct correlation experience.
Absolutely.
And I think they miss out on the ability to hire so many tremendous people to help enhance their organization because somebody doesn't have a specific degree they need and a specific experience doing the exact job they're going to be doing.
Completely agree. I mean, we've got some positions here that I need you to have a degree in.
Sure.
If you're going to be one of my chemists, I need you to have a chemistry degree.
I would like my doctor to be a doctor.
I would like my lawyer to have passed the bar.
Yeah.
There's some things that we do with that. And there are some experiential skills that I'd like people to come in with. So when we were just recently hiring for an administrative assistant, I wanted somebody who was comfortable on the phones. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't have time to train somebody to answer phones. I didn't care what their job title was. I didn't care if they did it at a nursing home or they did it at a high school or they had done it in manufacturing. I don't care. I just needed them to be able to answer a phone. Mm-hmm. I generally care if you graduated from high school, I'll be really honest.
Okay.
Or for office jobs, for the simple reason that makes it, that proves to me that you've finished something.
Okay.
But if you come to me or your GED, I don't care. But I get a cover letter that's like, hey, I was taking care of my mom, or I used to make really terrible decisions and I want to make better ones. Sounds good. I don't ever need a college degree for anything again, except for my chemists. Please have a chemistry degree. But if we start, looking for another leader, none of us here have MBAs. I'm not going to ask for that. Mm-hmm. When I hire a payroll assistant, I would like you to be able to use a computer and maybe have experience with payroll. But the way I've told other people to do it is scale down the bare minimum of the skills you need them to have some training in. Mm-hmm. Decide what you can train in and what you don't have time for. And then everything else is a culture fit.
Yeah.
And by the time they get to an interview, it should be a vibe check.
You said that when we were talking before, and I love that everybody you interview is qualified for the job. If you've made it that far, I know you can do the job. Everything else is about vibe check. Do they enhance the culture? Will you help us be better?
And it's why you don't play games with people once they get to the interview stage. Phone interviews are a mess. I mean, obviously screening interviews, I've had so many people ghost me. I've accidentally ghosted other people, blah, 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 blah. They're on a Zoom with you with more than two of your executives, or they're in the room with you. You treat them with dignity and respect because it's a vibe check. That's all. You have acknowledged their professionalism on a level already. And so treat them with the same respect.
Why are so many interviews still like a parole board meeting?
I have no idea. Because people are scared. I think I'll be really honest with you, Travis. I think some of the professionalization of HR has terrified people.
You got to dig into that. That's a hot statement.
Some of it. I didn't say all of it, But I think people who just hear in the news, what does the government say? 97% of American businesses are small, so it's under 500 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I meet folks every day that don't have HR departments that are that size. They don't really, especially under 50 people, they don't have HR departments. So they don't actually know what they can and cannot ask in an interview. And they're getting all their information about that from Google, CNN, or Fox News. And so they don't know what they can ask and what they can't. So they either err on the side of being total jerks and asking everything inappropriate, or they err on the side of asking nothing because they're terrified.
Mm-hmm.
So like what I wish SHRM would do, for instance, is like just a 2-page PDF on like what you can and cannot ask during interviews. And let me just email that out to everybody. So we actually know. No, you can't ask what age people are, but you can ask like, what's the best experience that you had during college?
Sure.
You can like, no, I would not recommend asking them about their kids, but you can certainly set up questions where if they want to share about their kids, they can. The other thing is that folks get scared of talking to people because we're not used to it anymore. So they'll download interview questions off the internet and not ever think about it.
That's not an interview. That's an interrogation.
It's an interrogation. We're not skilled in having conversations anymore. Especially, and I'll say this too, the American education system, God love it, has eliminated a lot of critical thinking time for students.
Test taking.
And that's part of the No Child Left Behind Act of the early mid-2000s, is that if you're in any system, because Northern Ireland and England have the same teach to the test system, and I saw this over there as well, you're going to have really, really crappy interviews with everyone under the age of 30 moving forward now, because we're taught how to memorize answers and not how to give them. So the best thing you can do for those kind of things is push back just a little bit and then give them a little bit of space to squirm. Because they don't know how to answer the question, and that's okay. But yeah, I love the professionalization of HR. Let me tell you that. I think it's great. I really love that we can report people for shitty behavior. I think that's fantastic. I think the problem has come that HR is not a mandated thing in a business in this country. And so there's no uniform way to do it. And so a lot of people are just doing it wrong.
How do you suggest people do it right?
Hire us. Just kidding. Recognize that you might need it. Just because your company is working for you does not mean it's working for your employees. And so just because you like the culture doesn't mean everybody else does. I'm a big believer that an HR person can't be part-time.
Okay.
But they can be outsourced. So like your employees need to be able to get a hold of somebody whenever they need to during working hours. But they don't have to be on site because we all have phones now. So if you don't know where to start, there's lots of companies out there that can help you start. And even if you don't have the capital or the cash to hire one of them, a lot of the salespeople will just teach you what questions to ask. And your state, if you're listening to us in the United States, your state will probably have a chapter of the Society for Human Resource Management. Check their website, give them a call, ask for some help. If you're listening in Europe, your city council will have this kind of thing, and kind of Google that way. But there's also, let me say too, there's two sides to HR. There's benefits management, which is super easy to outsource. Like everyone and their mother can help you do that. And then there's like relational management, and that's a much deeper and more involved conversation that should have a trained professional. Social workers are great, for instance, if you're looking for somebody. Google that MSW. And that's a much more complicated conversation. Benefits management is easy, but make sure you at least have that.
And even HR managers don't always have the skills that you think they would. I remember I was talking to a human resources manager about us working for their company, helping them find someone. And she says, all right, well, we need somebody 10 years experience, a little fresher in their career, need them to have this experience, A, B, C, D. But I don't want to hire any gals that are going to get knocked up in the next 5 to 10 years.
Cool. 2 thumbs way up. Thanks for saying that one out loud.
Female HR manager.
Yep.
That was a pretty hard pass on our end.
Yeah, that doesn't fit with your culture.
That was, And to hear that from someone, it blows my mind that that's still a thought in people's minds, that they think that it not only is it okay to think that, but to say that out loud is unbelievable.
I know. And it's so much of it is because we don't think of other people as people. We think of them as cash producers.
Commodities.
Yeah, I think the phrase I use in one of my TED Talks is interchangeable cogs in a profit machine.
Oh, Jesus.
And that's what I see. I mean, I'll tell you, that's how we treat like postdocs in academia. It's one of the reasons I left. It's often how we treat young doctors and trainee doctors. You hear so many people who cut their teeth in Hollywood talking about that's how we treat PAs. Anytime somebody is an unpaid intern, they are an interchangeable cog in someone else's profit machine. So the book we're writing right now is actually on burnout and the cultural foundations of it and why burnout is just as American as apple pie. But we can rewrite it. And a huge part of those foundations is that our civic religion, like what it means to be American, is to be a capitalist. Mm-hmm. And what it means to be American is to be either productive or a bad person. And we've attached this moral judgment to people's work output. And so as much as we say we want babies in this country, we can't have babies that interfere with work output.
Yeah.
Sure, we're super pro-life and pro-child until a woman asks for daycare, for help paying for daycare. And then all of a sudden it's her fault that she doesn't have money to pay for daycare.
Yeah. Daycare's fucking expensive. But so how do we deal with this culture of burnout? How do we change it?
Come October 3rd, you're going to be able to buy our book that will help you explain all of that. Realistically, I would love to tell you that we overthrow the culture, but I don't have a whole lot of time to like overthrow capitalism right now. So it is a communal problem. Let me say that. It's a cultural problem. You are burned out because you are a human in a capitalistic society. Mm-hmm. You are not burned out because you have failed. You are not burned out because you failed to set boundaries or you haven't done enough yoga. No, you are burned out. You are exhausted. You are somewhere on the exhaustion to burnout spectrum because you live in a capitalistic society. How you then handle that is sometimes a little bit more of an individual response. Recognize that what works for somebody else is not going to necessarily work for you. I've got a couple things I kind of ask people to think about, come up with practices that bring you rest, because as much as I hate to admit this, sleep is evidently important. So, actually come up with ways to take naps and sleep a decent night. Come up with ways that rejuvenate you in some way. So this is just like unmitigated joy activities. Uh-huh. Like I love Disney World. So I go at least once a year. I love being with my niece and nephew. I make sure I'm there with them as often as I can be. So those are the things that just remind you that joy is part of human life and we're allowed to have fun. We're allowed to play. And then the other one I really like is the other one I really kind of help people focus on. There's two more, but this one is realignment. So this is practices that remind you who you are in the universe, that you are important, but you are not imperative and you get to delegate things. So, for people, a lot of people, this is their spiritual practice of like keeping Sabbath or doing meditation or something like that. Do something that centers you back on your breath and reminds you that you are beloved, but the world will keep spinning without you. And then the final one is reconnection. So make sure you're in community with people that will look at you and be like, yo, bro, like you gotta stop. Or, hey, let's go fishing this weekend. Or I haven't seen you in like 5 years. Let's plan something. Or let's go to the ball game this weekend. Or, hey, in that meeting yesterday, you seemed really off. Are you okay? You need other people. So those are kind of my 4 steps. Whatever that looks like for you is going to be different. And obviously, I joke all the time, but we're going to unpack this a lot more in the book and kind of what to do about it. But for my money, if you are feeling exhausted right now and you don't know what else to do, think of something that makes you happy. Something that makes you happy and carve out time to do it once a week. Start there.
How do you encourage this within your organization and couple it? I mean, as a business owner, as a cog in the American capitalist machine, how do you weigh that and encourage people to not reach that level of burnout and exhaustion within your organization while still having the responsibility within your organization to keep your people safe and make payroll and make profit for the owners and to continue to raise wages within your company?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying we start everybody off at a Philadelphia living wage. So that's a really important thing to us. We've also never had a layoff in 33 years, and we won't. The family will take no checks before we lay anybody off. We have fired a lot of people, but we will not lay you off. So those are core principles for us. And that makes, like, once you decide that that's a principle and those are non-negotiables, other things get, simple. So for one of the things that we do is we offer, kind of flexible time if you're a caregiver. Mm-hmm. So like you need to, take 2 weeks off to go take care of your mom who just had surgery. We may not be able to pay you for that whole time, but we'll hold your job. Mm-hmm. And we'll make sure you're not fired. It depends if we can pay you or not, what's going on, but we're going to be really honest. We offer paid pregnancy leave. And often we force our employees to take more time off than they want to, but like we will not let them come back without a doctor's note that says that they are cleared for work again. And they're like, but I'm so bored. I'm like, that is not my problem. I am going to make sure you are safe in our building. But like I joke, we've got a couple people who are workaholics. I don't give them keys to the building. They can't come in here if it's not unlocked. If you need to pick up your kid from daycare, we'll shift your schedule around. We're single shift. So, there's only so much we can do here, but we'll shift your schedule. We force everybody to take vacation days. We don't offer payouts. So we realized a couple of years ago that was encouraging more exhaustion among our employees because everyone always needs more money. Mm-hmm. And we were getting really concerned that people who also needed rest weren't doing it. So we canned the vacation payout options. We also kind of like there's banded times when you can just take a day off, because what we've learned over the years is that, February is really rough and you don't want to get out of bed, but we want to make sure that you can take that day at the beach when it's really sunny and nice in July. So like you can't, you've got to get special permission to take a personal day in the first quarter of the year. Okay. Because we want to help you make sure you can rest when it starts getting really, really hard in August. Uh-huh. When you can't be like your kids have been home all summer and you are ready to throw them off a ledge. Like we want to give you that space. We stayed open all through lockdowns, and we let people kind of somewhat as much as we were able to determine how they wanted to show up and when they wanted to show up and kind of what that looked like. So the other thing too is I've stopped believing in precedents. So just because I treat one employee one way doesn't mean I have to treat everybody every way. There's a difference between policies and precedents. Okay. And so like, for instance, one of the, we don't actually have a written sick leave policy because everybody has, and not a sick day policy. There is an absolute written sick day policy. Sick leave is a different ballgame because if you get health insurance through us, I'm not going to fire you if you need it while you're going through cancer. Yeah. And you've run out of your sick time 3 years ago. How could I fire you and you lose your health insurance? That's insane. And to us, ethically disgusting. I can give somebody who just gave birth 6 weeks if her doctor says yes, or 12 weeks if that's what her doctor says she needs. But I'm not violating a policy ever, nor am I setting a precedent. I get to treat every employee as an individual. And I respect, we're like under 50 people. So I've got a lot more leeway that way. And I know that people who are 300-400 people are listening to this going like sod off. Like there's no way I can do any of that. But there are principles of what I just said that you can figure out how to work within your policies. It's hard, but so is leadership. It's technically why we all get paid the big bucks. But ultimately, if you want to create a culture of a culture that does not cultivate burnout, that does not contribute to any of someone else's burnout, the simplest and easiest way is to treat them like people.
There it is. There's the thesis of the conversation. Kristen, this has been fantastic. If people want to reach out to you or to Abbey Research about anything, what's the best way for them to find you?
Our website is argooddoctors.com.
And we'll look for your book come October. Do you know what the title is going to be yet?
Yep, The Culture of Burnout, Why Your Exhaustion is Not Your Fault.
There you go. This has been fantastic. Dr. Kristen Donnelly, thank you so much. Big thank you to our producer, Noah Cuff. Thank you so much, everyone, and talk to you soon.